When I looked over and saw the barrel of that shotgun staring at me out of his window, that's when I realized somebody wants me murdered. Like, this person wants me killed. At that point, your life comes back as like a flash to you. And I just remember thinking, I can't, it's not my time. And I didn't want to go that way.
There's news conferences going on telling people to stay indoors. There's a killer on the loose. So at this point, we know this is something huge. I couldn't believe it. My mom was the sweetest lady that you can think of. It was painful to imagine her dying alone. I thought that I would be by her side, holding her until she took her last breath. But she didn't have that.
This is the worst single perpetrator I've dealt with in my career. 5 murders and 11 attempted murders. To think that anyone could just pull up behind you at any time and kill you, and you just never know it's coming. It's terrifying to think that someone like that is roaming around among us. And I think that is why the detectives went into overdrive to find this guy and find him fast, because we can't let another one happen.
It was August 20th of 2014, and I take the 5 South to work. I start work at 6 a.m., so it was dark. I noticed a vehicle get on with no lights on. So I glanced at the vehicle, thinking to myself, that's odd. And it was a larger vehicle. So I thought to myself, I better keep this person in my view and make sure that I don't hit them or get in their lane. You know, just want to make sure I was driving safely. So I continued my drive. And as soon as I got off, I stopped. There's a stop sign. And I was stopped at the stop sign, and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, and all of a sudden I heard a hiss and a pop, and I felt wet. And I looked down, and I just had blood everywhere on my shirt. And I'm like, where am I bleeding from? Like, where did this come from? I looked around, and I was like, blood? I was like, what? But I didn't feel any pain. I didn't feel anything. So at that point, I turned, and to the back was the vehicle I saw on the freeway. I could only see like the front bumper and his front window. And I saw the barrel of a shotgun. I thought immediately, okay, it's a carjacking. I tried calling 911. I couldn't talk. I don't know what's going on. I heard like 3 to 5 shots, and then like 4 to 5 or maybe more. He was shooting at the back of my car at that time. That's when I realized somebody wants me murdered. Like, this person wants me killed. I kept going over in my mind, like, what have I done to somebody so bad that they want to kill me? I was talking to God the whole time. I was like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? You know, I'm gonna die. I've lost so much blood. And when I looked up, my rosary that hangs from my rearview mirror on my car, it was going from like side to side. I'm like a clock pendulum, like a grandfather clock. And I was like, okay, time's of the essence, like, get out. You don't have time to sit here, go. And that's what made me get out of my car. That was the sign. I was running in the street, trying to flag down help, and nobody would help me. I ran to a guard, and I'm like, please, like, help me. He goes, don't worry, we're getting help for you. I felt like I was dying. I couldn't breathe. And this gentleman came and he grabbed me, and he held me. He put pressure on my throat. He was an angel. I told him I have a son. I told him, I said, I can't leave my son. He said, you're gonna be okay. All his positivity and all his words kind of helped me pull through in that moment. I just remember thinking, I can't, it's not my time. And I didn't want to go that way.
I found this picture in her jewelry box, and I believe this might be her, like her senior portrait from high school in El Salvador. It made me feel happy. You know, this is a memory of her in her youth. My mom was the sweetest lady that you can think of. She was all about her kids and her grandchildren and about church. Faith was everything for my mom. And she lived it. She lived her faith. And she said, you know, when I die, I'm sure that I'm going to go to heaven. I'm not afraid. He was coming through the San Fernando area, stopped at a light, and he was shot and killed. It was an unsolved murder, and thinking of this person just stopped at a light, going to work early in the morning, like that could be anybody. So they gathered together, they prayed the rosary, they hugged, and they were really trying to console the Morales family. They wanted to make sure that they prayed for him and for his soul to rest. On August 24th, 2014, it was probably 7 in the morning, and my cousin was calling me. And she's kind of hesitant, like to tell me something. And she's like, your mom's been shot. And she's like, I don't know much, but I just know that your mom was shot on her way to church. I was just like shocked. I had no idea what was going on. I was scared. I couldn't believe it. I was just hoping she was still alive. I felt like I just wanted to be near her.
This is Gloria Tovar's car, where she was found shot to death. And of course, the police put the tarp over the car so that passerbys would not see her body inside. It was a very gruesome crime scene. So the first 911 call that morning came from the 12-year-old Franco children at 5:40 a.m., reporting that their parents and sister had been shot. But even as that's occurring, they're hearing over their police radios that another shooting has occurred in a park in Sylmar, which is Michael Planell's. And then a matter of minutes later, 6:48, that Gloria Tovar had been shot. There's 3 shootings in very close geographic proximity in a short period of time involving a shotgun. And in 2 of those, the suspect vehicle was identified as a large gold or tan-colored SUV type vehicle. And the bat signal went up. All police agencies were notified. And that's when the animal cruelty detective came forward with his information. Yeah, this is the key video from the dog shooting. You can see the Suburban right in front of the gate, and shoots 3 shotgun blasts into that side gate, killing 2 of the dogs and injuring the other. And their tails are wagging while they die. And the next morning, of course, you had the 3 murders. They immediately, of course, suspected and feared that they had a serial killer on the loose. If a murder happens in a small community, everyone knows about it and everyone has a pretty good idea who might be involved. But in Los Angeles, you can just disappear. It's terrifying to think that someone like that is roaming around among us. And I think that is why the detectives went into overdrive to find this guy and find him fast. So we can't let another one happen.
Next thing I remember is waking up, and I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm in a hospital bed. I was still trying to make sense of what had happened. And that's when I reached for my throat and I felt the trach in the feeding tube, and I was like, uh-oh, oh my gosh, I can't talk. Like, it's just air's going and nothing's coming out. So they got a dry erase board because that's how I'd have to communicate. And right away I was like, what happened? Why can't I talk? And they're like, you had throat trauma. And that moment was hard for me because I was like, well, this is temporary, right? And they're like, we don't know yet. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, oh my God, I fought for my life. I went through this surgery that I almost didn't survive. And then now you're telling me I may never talk again? I may never be able to tell my son the words of I love you again. And I was even more angry at this person who did this, and then he still was out there. I still was on a lot of pain medication, and my mind was still foggy. So there were certain things that were kind of hazy for me. So I just was trying to pull as much as I could from my memory. I had to have a whiteboard to give them a description of the vehicle. But they were so confused because I was drawing the back of the vehicle. And the detective's like, Nicole, who's shooting at the back of your car? But I didn't know. I wasn't sure. And I was like, oh no, you know what? I didn't see the back of the vehicle. I just didn't, because you're right. He never passed me on the freeway. So I just was like, okay, you guys are right. Like, I never saw it. Just disregard anything. It's just so frustrating. But I felt a strength. Like, I have a job to do. I can't sit here and feel sorry for myself and feel pity. I need to get back on my feet, and I need to get this person caught because he's gonna hurt other people.
When we got to the scene, there was a couple of police officers that had already closed off the area. And I asked, can we get close? Can I touch her? And they said no. I remember that the person that actually called the police about the shooting came up to us. And he said, is that your mom? And we said, yeah, that's our mom. And he's like, you don't want to look. You don't want to remember your mom that way. It's bad. It was painful to imagine her dying alone without anybody near her. I thought that I would be by her side, holding her, with her family surrounding her until she took her last breath. But she didn't have that. She died alone in her car. Seeing our dad that way was horrible. He's like, that's my wife. I want to be near her. I need to protect her. And help me and my brother. I'm stuff like that. You need to calm down. You can't get close. He wasn't gonna see her again. He wasn't gonna hold her again. None of us would. And my father told the detectives that interviewed us, I put God's eyes in your hands for you to be able to find the person that did this to my wife. God's gonna show you who did this to her. And you're gonna find that person.
On Sunday morning, with 3 murders in the news within an hour in very close proximity, the police were under enormous pressure to find the true perpetrator and get them in custody. A shotgun is not a weapon used in a lot of crimes. Most of the murders in Los Angeles and the shootings involve handguns. So it looked right off the bat like we had a really strong MO between those cases. And that's a lot of shootings for one person to be committing. He gives his name. He says, "My name is Alex." And then Alex says, "Can you help me go get gas for my car?" And they drive him to his home, which is a very short distance away, where he gets a gas can. They take him to get gas and bring him back to his Suburban. So they knew what his Suburban looked like, they knew his name, and they knew where he lived. The detectives drove over and they saw the Suburban parked behind the gate of that house. They immediately put surveillance on that residence. It was surrounded front and rear by SWAT, and they had helicopters surveilling the property immediately. All of Mr. Hernandez's family members came out of the house. He did not come. He stayed in the house, and he stayed in the yard. The helicopter surveillance officers observed him, as they describe it, crawling like with his arms and stomach on the ground, as if to stay low and out of sight. He jumped over the brick wall onto the neighbor's property, into their yard. But there were 2 SWAT officers stationed there, and they grabbed him immediately when he jumped over the wall. He had the shotgun in his hands. It was loaded, and he threw it down when he saw them, and they apprehended him. But he did not surrender quietly. He fought the police, and they tasered him. And after that, he was taken to the hospital to be checked to make sure he was okay after being tasered. I think the circumstances of his arrest tell us a lot about what he was thinking and what his plans were. He's carrying a loaded shotgun. He has extra shot shell in his pockets, and he's got a backpack with all his identification, his car keys, his passport, his birth certificate. We did as much research as we could on Mr. Hernandez, and all I can tell you is there's nothing remarkable there. He had been to prison before, and he had those prior convictions, but they were not violent crimes. He wasn't shooting at people. He had guns. He had prior convictions for possessing firearms. He had some prior convictions for drugs. nothing that foreshadowed these events. He had a family that lived in that home. By all accounts, nice people. There was nothing in his history, nothing in his past, and nothing in his present that would give you any indication that he's a serial killer. But I think even a very basic review of the facts of the 3 murders that occurred Sunday morning would lead any reasonable person to strongly believe that those were related. But we also knew that the vehicle was being processed and that they were looking at potential firearms evidence. And they were still processing the evidence. Particularly things like forensic evidence and DNA can't be processed overnight. It takes time. But you have 48 hours to file charges. Once you arrest someone, it has to be done within that time period or they get released. And obviously there was a great concern that Mr. Hernandez not be released, that would be a terrible danger to the public.
Once my mom was picked up from the crime scene, we all gathered at my parents' house. And I went in one of the bedrooms where she would keep all her clothes and stuff. And I just picked up one of her garments and I smelled it. And it smelled like her. And I couldn't believe she was gone. Later, we found out that there was a series of killings that morning, and my mom was not the only one. And that there had been 2 more shootings in the area, not so far from where my mom was shot and killed. There's news conferences going on, telling people to stay indoors. There's a killer on the loose. So at this point, we know this is something huge. I remember watching when they had his house surrounded and seeing him get taken in that ambulance and getting arrested. We were all in my parents' living room watching the news. It helps them. We knew that the person that had done this was caught and wasn't going to do that again to somebody else. Like, who does that? It's unimaginable, and I was just relieved that he was off the streets. And that part of our story was closed, but we had a long way to go.
I remember the lead detective telling me, "Kiddo, we got him." I was in the hospital. And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, No. You swear to me." Like, I was in disbelief that they caught him that fast. I kept asking God, please keep giving me signs along the way that we're on the right path and that we're gonna get justice and he's gonna be off the streets. He's not gonna hurt anyone again. My family will be safe. I can go home and sleep well at night. And it just, all my prayers kept getting answered. I knew I needed to give the police some type of identification for the vehicle. But 2 months. 2 months I did not have my voice. I'll never forget the last time I went to my throat doctor and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna take the trach out. You ready? This is your big day." And I'm like, "I got this. I'm gonna do this." And he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna pull the trach out." He goes, "Say E." And I said, "E." "Say I." And he was like, "You can talk." And I said, "Yes, I can." I wanted to be able to speak to the detectives. The detectives came to the house and they had maps. This is your route to work. This is your exit. He kept saying, "The only thing we don't know, Nicole, is what happened on the freeway." And I said, his lights being off drew my attention. So I kept sizing up the vehicle. Okay, it's a larger vehicle. It's a Suburban or a Yukon. but they're way behind me. And they're like, no, Nicole, you saw the back. You saw it. You told us about it. Now I need you to remember. And it clicked, like a light bulb went off. Oh my God, I started crying and I felt my mind being more clear. I could remember more. I walked up to this man's vehicle. After he tried to murder me, that's how I saw the back of his vehicle. That was traumatic. But I guess mentally your mind suppresses things. They did end up eventually pulling the video from the location I was shot in. Okay, so this is when he's following closely behind me. He's in the Suburban. And I'm getting out of the car. I walked up to his vehicle, the passenger side. I couldn't talk completely. I was gurgling and I was very angry. And I went up to his window. I was like, who are you? Why are you doing this? And it was just this dark, empty, blank stare. Nothing. Why he didn't shoot me then, I don't know. So at this point of the video, I'm knocking on the windows. I'm trying to get help and people are just speeding away from me. And I tried to beg and plead with people, please, please help me. And everyone was like, no, I ain't getting involved. I'm not gonna help you. Go to hell, whatever. I don't know. They wanted nothing to do with it. And I just, like I said, I felt disgusted. I felt hopeless. I felt defeated. I can't even breathe. Still hard for you to watch? I literally threw myself on the side of her car and I'm like, please help me. And she said no. How could she not help me? And when I saw that other gentleman that came and helped me, I hope I can find out who that person is and reach out to that person and tell him thank you. Because he didn't have to do that. And I've been totally grateful to you for giving me more time with my family, my friends, and my life. And what you did was, it saved my life. It helped save my life. I didn't know how everything came together. I was kept in the dark about that. But they were saying it was a serial killer. And that's when it hit me, like, oh my God, there's more people probably before me, like this guy. That word serial killer was so impactful to me, like, oh my God, a serial killer tried to kill me. I know what I had to do. I had to testify and I had to get justice. He took away my voice, but my voice is here and he's gonna hear it.
Once the evidence suggested that he was a serial killer, then you have to examine, and I think it's a natural question, when did this start? How many more are we going to find? It was the detectives at LAPD Robbery Homicide Division that started piecing it together. They looked at not just every shotgun shooting, but they started to look at potential handgun shootings too. And we eventually added multiple victims that stretched back 6 months and included multiple people who'd been shot by Mr. Hernandez. starting with Sergio Sanchez, whose murder was completely unsolved, who was found dead in his car on a freeway with really almost no evidence except one sparse clue, a tip from a truck driver who saw a big gold SUV. The next one was another shooting, a gentleman named Mario Gamboa. Mario was driving on the freeway late at night. He noticed a large SUV following him down the 5 freeway. Again, this is the Suburban, pulled up behind him and fired multiple handgun rounds into his car. And one of them struck him in the back. And he ran away and hid, actually. The third was a man named Luis Valdez. And Luis Valdez had gone out for the evening and came home late. And he didn't want to wake his father, who he shared an apartment with. So he was going to park outside the apartment complex and sleep in his car until morning. And the next thing he knows, he is awakened by multiple shots being fired into his car. And he awakens, obviously in horror. He looks up and he sees this large gold SUV next to him. He ended up being transported to the hospital and treated for multiple gunshot wounds. And the other key shooting was the shooting of Julian Archer. Julian Archer was a young man who was bringing his girlfriend home from prom, and he dropped her off and drove away from her house and was driving home when a large truck pulled up next to him, and he fired multiple rounds into his car with a handgun. Julian Archer was shot multiple times in the back. It damaged his spine. He managed to call 911 himself before he passed out from his injuries in his car.
911 emergency, operator 656.
I've been shot. Okay, I'm on Mail and Corbin. I've been shot like 4 times.
Mail and Corbin?
As it turns out, the home that Julian Archer drove by just blocks before he was shot was the home of defendant Hernandez's girlfriend. And they interviewed her father. He says, yeah, I did hear shots last night. I was awake because my daughter was here with her boyfriend and they were having an argument. And after my daughter came in the house, he drove away, and a few minutes later I heard shots coming from that direction. That was Mr. Hernandez leading that scene, and Julian Archer ultimately identified him in a photographic lineup. The Suburban was the critical piece of evidence. When they get it to the crime lab and do a very close examination with bright lights, that's when they start finding the blood and tissue, and swabbed hundreds of places in that car. It was under the engine compartment. It was in the wheel well. It was inside his car on the passenger seat because the window was open. So the Suburban was a gold mine of evidence. There's no rhyme or reason to why he killed these people. There's no obvious motive. There's no obvious motive, and we looked. I mean, you are looking to go, is there a commonality with the victims? Is it the cars? Is it their race? Is it their gender? Is it something that happened? And there's nothing. There's nothing. The motive might be as simple as he liked killing people. It was a long process. We went through multiple additions to the charges over the first 2 years of the case. He was charged with 32 counts.
It was an emotional roller coaster every time something came up. You go through the same feelings. You open up Pandora's box for yourself. My mom's brain matter was found in his engine, and different parts of her DNA were in there. In my mind, that's telling me God had to have a hand in that. I feel that God ensured that there was something that would trace him back to her. She was murdered in a heinous way. She was taken from us. He had no sense of humanity. These human beings, these loved ones that we lost, meant nothing. It was like he was just a hunter and they were his prey. But somebody like that, he doesn't need a slap on the wrist. He needs to be put away for as many years as possible.
So this is the rosary I was speaking about that hung in my car when I got shot. When I saw my car before it was destroyed, I cried because there it was, waiting for me to get it. So when I got a new car, when I was able to go back to work, and my son and I hung it together on the rearview mirror, and I took a picture of us hanging it together. It drives me to work every day. Every time I am in my car, this is guiding my way, watching over me like it did that morning. After I testified, Morales' sister grabbed me when I came off the stand, and I didn't know who she was, and she said, "You're my brother's voice. You're going to help get justice for us." And she hugged me, and she said, "Thank you." My heart aches for them. I feel guilt because they're not here anymore. There's a lot of loss, and I felt that when I had dark moments and I had dark times that they weren't here to speak and say what they felt or saw or what their fight was or how they felt. So no matter what fears I had or if I had good or bad days, I had to keep going forward. And I'm just glad that the pain I felt, the suffering I felt, that it went to providing some type of documentation for tying this guy to these crimes, because now justice is served.
The sentence in this case was 5 consecutive terms of life without the possibility of parole, and in addition to and consecutive to that, upwards of 400 years in prison. The thing is, even in prison, he gets to get visits from his family, write and receive letters, read the newspaper, watch the news, watch TV, see his kids grow up. The families of the victims don't get that for their deceased victims. They don't ever get it again. This case means more to me than any other case that I've handled because of the absolute innocence of the victims and the way they were so randomly targeted in a way that makes no sense and doesn't have any justification. It's very personal when you go through the process for this many years with these victims. It's personal in the sense that I really care about them. I told those victims that I will have this case and I will watch over this case for the rest of my life. And I will. Because they deserve it.
I think my mother would forgive him. I do. And I think my mother would even pray for him to get forgiveness. That's just the person that she was. I miss her every day. I feel that even though I've built strength, I have times where I fall apart, where I wish she was here because I know that she would help me so much. In the past year, my husband got very, very sick and he's battling cancer right now. And that's been really hard to go through without her. Uh, because I know that she would be here to help me. I know that she would have been there with him as well. I hope that people understand who she was and the person that we lost. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't say I'll do it next time or we'll gather another time. Because you never know. You don't know if that person is going to be there. And be thankful for it.
It starts with a single photograph, a woman's face half lit by the amber glow of a streetlight caught in the final moment anyone ever saw her alive. December 1998, South Side, Chicago. The wind was merciless that night, slicing through the alleys like a whisper carrying secrets. People still talk about how quiet it got. After she disappeared, like the whole block was holding its breath. Her name was Melissa Turner, 28, a nurse known for her laugh that could lift a room. On December 12th, she walked out of Mercy Hospital at 11:07 p.m. and never made it home. For days, her car sat untouched near the elevated tracks. Doors locked, keys gone, her cell phone a flip. Motorola still glowing was found in the passenger seat. No sign of a struggle, no fingerprints, just a trace of perfume on the air and a blood smear the size of a coin on the driver's handle. It was enough to rattle detectives, but not enough to solve anything. The file was open-coded, case 4471M, and over the years it sank to the bottom of a steel drawer in the evidence room, forgotten, dust-covered cold. Back then, Chicago was drowning in crime. Murders every week, missing persons piling up faster than reports could be filed. Melissa's case blended into the noise. The lead detective retired, another took over, then another. By 2005, the city barely remembered her, but some stories refused to die. In 2024, a new task force, the Cold Case Reinvestigation Unit, began digitizing old evidence boxes. It was supposed to be routine work, scan, tag, archive. But when Officer Donna Ruiz lifted the old Turner file, she noticed something odd, a sealed envelope marked unprocessed latent print. A fingerprint collected from the interior rearview mirror of Melissa's car, never run through the new federal database. 26 years later, that single oversight would detonate like a bomb. The print was scanned and uploaded into the AFIS system at 3:47 p.m. on June 9th. Ruiz watched the screen flicker, expecting nothing. Then a hit. 97% match. Name Ethan Cole, male, 38. A mechanic from the same neighborhood. Arrested once for auto theft, released without charges. The same man who in 1998 had lived 2 blocks from where Melissa vanished. The shock rippled through the department. Files reopened. Reporters smelled blood. The Chicago Tribune headline 2 days later read, "Cold Case Fingerprint Links Local Mechanic to Missing Nurse." But the story was far from simple. Ethan Cole had died in 2016, overdose, unclaimed body, yet his fingerprint pulled from that mirror brought him roaring back into the investigation like a ghost with unfinished business. Detective Ruiz couldn't let it go. She visited the old apartment building on 79th Street, now half-condemned, windows boarded. Neighbors still remembered Melissa. They remembered her smile, her kindness, and the fear that followed her disappearance. One old tenant, Mrs. Calloway, whispered through the cracked door. He used to watch her, always by the window. Said he fixed her car once. Gave me the chills. Ruiz wrote it down. Back at headquarters, she replayed the old interview tapes. Ethan Cole had been questioned in 1999 briefly. Calm, cooperative, he said he barely knew Melissa. Said he'd seen her at the gas station once or twice. No witnesses placed him near her car. The interview ended in 32 minutes. No follow-up. case closed, or rather, case abandoned. But the fingerprint told a different story. Cole's print wasn't on the door or the steering wheel, it was on the mirror. A place you'd touch only if you were sitting inside, maybe adjusting it, maybe checking your face before leaving. A small, intimate gesture, and that raised a bigger question: when was it left there? Before she vanished? Or after? Ruiz started digging deeper. Cole's death record showed a minor notation next of kin unknown. But when she pulled financial records, she found deposits made after his death monthly consistent from a construction firm registered in Indiana. Someone had been using his identity. That changed everything. Ruiz met with FBI liaison agent Marcus Dyer, who specialized in identity fraud. Together, they built a digital map every time Ethan Cole appeared in databases after 2016, a credit card purchase, a motel check, and a job application. They pinned it. The map lit up like Christmas lights stretching across Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. One pattern stood out: multiple sightings clustered around Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The lake town was quiet, wealthy, far removed from Chicago's chaos, perfect place to disappear. In late July, Ruiz drove there herself. She stopped at a small diner overlooking the water-ordered coffee and showed the waitress an old photo of Ethan Cole. The woman squinted, nodded slowly. He used to come here. Same order every time. Eggs, black coffee side of hash browns. But that wasn't his name. He went by Rick. Ruiz's pulse quickened. Rick, a dead man walking wearing the skin of Ethan Cole. She followed the trail to a small mechanic's shop on the edge of town, the kind of place that smelled like oil and rust. The sign out front read, Rick's Auto Service since 2017. Inside, tools hung neatly on the wall, invoices stacked, no one in sight. But in the back office, behind a false panel, she found a photograph, the snapshot of a young woman by Lake Michigan, smiling, wearing a nurse's uniform, Melissa Turner. The air went cold. Ruiz stood frozen, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. Someone had kept that photo, framed it, hidden it behind a wall. Why? She called for backup. Crime scene techs dusted for prints. They found several partials, none matching Cole's, but one, faint and incomplete, bore a familiar pattern. The same loop, the same ridge ending identical to Melissa's right thumbprint. How could that be? She'd been gone for 26 years. The lab confirmed it. Not a copy, not a transfer, a fresh print, the oils still intact, less than 6 months old. Ruiz stared at the report until the words blurred. If Melissa's fingerprint was real, then the entire narrative collapsed. Maybe she hadn't been killed. Maybe she'd run. Maybe someone helped her disappear. But then came the call. A fisherman on Lake Geneva had found something, a submerged metal locker tangled in reeds near the shore. Inside, wrapped in layers of decayed plastic, was a nurse's badge. The nameplate corroded but still legible, Melissa Turner, RN. No body, no bones, just the badge. Forensics couldn't date it precisely, but fragments of algae suggested it hadn't been in the water long, maybe a year, maybe less. Ruiz's mind raced. If Melissa had lived in hiding, who was she hiding from? And why resurface now in the same town where a dead man's name was still alive? She revisited the evidence board. At the center, the fingerprint on the mirror, the photo behind the wall, the badge from the lake. 3 pieces each from different decades, all orbiting the same mystery. The story spread like wildfire. Chicago cold case reopened. One fingerprint changes everything. News vans lined the streets. Old wounds reopened. The Turner family, long silent, returned to the spotlight. Her mother, gray-haired and trembling, stood on her porch before the cameras. If she's alive. I just want to know why she never came home. But beneath the media frenzy, Ruiz kept working. She requested the original case photos from 1998, the ones taken the night Melissa vanished. As she clicked through them, one image stopped her cold. It showed the reflection in the car window, faint, distorted, almost invisible, but clear enough now, enhanced with modern software. A man's outline. Tall, wearing a mechanic's uniform. It wasn't Ethan Cole. The reflection matched no one in the police database. But on the chest pocket of his uniform, a single stitched name was visible in reverse, R. Cole. Ruiz's stomach dropped. If Ethan had a brother, if someone else had been there that night, the case was about to explode again. She dug through birth records, school registries, tax IDs. After 2 days, she found it. Richard Cole, born 1972, older brother, disappeared from Chicago records in 1999, never declared dead. No trace since. A ghost chasing another ghost. Ruiz leaned back in her chair, the hum of the city outside fading into a low, distant roar. 26 years, 2 missing people. 1 fingerprint, and the story was just beginning to breathe again. The city didn't sleep that week. Reporters prowled outside precinct doors, digging for scraps. Every local channel looped the same headline. Fingerprint links, 2 vanished souls, Chicago cold case reignites. Inside the task force room, fluorescent lights hummed over corkboards littered with photos, timelines, red threads stretching like veins across decades. Detective Donna Ruiz stood at the center eyes, fixed on one question. Where had Richard Cole gone? No record, no death certificate, no driver's license renewals. It was as if he had vanished into smoke the year Melissa Turner disappeared. Ruiz started with the old paper trail. Richard Cole had worked at Benton's Garage, a small auto repair shop near Halstead Street. Payroll sheets from 1998 showed his last day on December 13th, the morning after Melissa was last seen. He'd never picked up his final paycheck. Ruiz drove there the next morning. The garage was gone, replaced by a laundromat and a discount store. But one mechanic from that era, Leo Matthews, still ran a body shop a few blocks away. He was gray, now heavy-set hands, stained with decades of grease. When Ruiz showed him the photo, he froze. "Yeah," he said slowly, "that's Richie Cole. Quiet guy, smoked too much, used to take jobs off the books, odd hours." Ruiz leaned closer. "You remember the night Melissa Turner vanished?" Leo rubbed his chin. "Sure, cops came around after, asking if we knew Ethan, but nobody mentioned Richie. Thing is, that night Richie borrowed the shop truck, said he had a late-night call. Never brought it back. What happened to the truck?" He looked uneasy. "Found abandoned, near Jackson Park. Cops towed it. Nobody asked me about it again." Ruiz felt her pulse tick. The case file never mentioned a shop truck. She jotted down the VIN number Leo recalled from memory, called the archives. 2 hours later, confirmation vehicle recovered December 15th, 1998, unclaimed, auctioned in 1999. Inside the logbook, one small note, traces of bleach smell in cargo area. Bleach, the eraser of stories. The next day, Ruiz stood in the evidence warehouse, the smell of dust and old paper thick around her. She located the Turner Materials container, a dented gray box sealed with a brittle label. When she cracked it open, time seemed to leak out, Polaroids curled at the edges, faded witness notes, a few sealed vials labeled unknown residue. She found one bag tagged truck sample. December 15th, 98. Within it, a strip of carpet fiber. Forensic technology in the 90s could do little with it, but in 2024 things were different. The lab could pull DNA from dust. She submitted it immediately. While waiting for results, Ruiz returned to Lake Geneva. She couldn't stop thinking about that hidden photograph Melissa in her nurse's uniform found behind the wall of Rick's auto service. Whoever placed it there wanted it close yet unseen. And now knowing there were 2 Coles, Ethan and Richard. The question burned, which brother had she trusted? Which one had she feared? The town was calm, deceptively peaceful, autumn gold along the lakeshore. Ruiz visited the local hardware store where the shop's materials had been purchased. The owner, an older man with watery eyes, remembered a customer who matched Richard's photo. Name was Rick, he said. Bought lockboxes, heavy-duty plastic, and some waterproof sealant. Quiet man. Paid cash. Drove a gray van. Ruiz asked, "When was that?" He squinted, thinking. "Oh. Early last year. Around May." The same window, the lake badge appeared. She left with the receipt number and a gut that wouldn't stop twisting. If Richard had been alive until last year, it meant the case wasn't a story of ghosts. It was a story of survival. At dusk, Ruiz sat by the water wind, biting through her coat, watching fishermen haul their nets. Somewhere beneath those black waves had been Melissa's badge, and maybe more. A cold case is like the lake itself, still on the surface, chaos below. Back in Chicago, the lab called. The DNA from the truck's carpet strip had been processed. Results: female partial match to Melissa Turner's mother. 99% likelihood it belonged to Melissa herself. That meant she had been in the truck, or at least her blood had. Ruiz's heart sank. The hope of a living Melissa dimmed. But one thing was now certain: Richard Cole had transported her. Whether dead or alive, he'd been the last person to see her. She reviewed Richard's old phone records landline, only disconnected in early 1999, but she noticed a number dialed repeatedly the week before Melissa vanished a payphone near Mercy Hospital. She pulled security archives, but the tapes were long gone. Then, something strange surfaced: a 911 call placed at 11:26 p.m. on December 12th, traced to that same payphone. The recording had never been connected to her disappearance because the caller hung up, but now, with AI-based enhancement, the tech unit retrieved fragments of the voice. A man panicked, words distorted but audible. "Help! She's hurt! I didn't mean to..." Then silence. Ruiz replayed it until every syllable carved deeper. The timestamp matched the last moment Melissa's phone pinged. Whoever made that call was with her, likely Richard. She contacted the Wisconsin State Police for cross-records of any Richard Cole sightings. One name popped up: a parking violation in 2017 issued to a Rick C. driving a gray Dodge van with fake plates. Ticket signed by Officer Karen Lowry. Ruiz called her immediately. Lowry remembered him well. Yeah, guy was nervous, hands shaking. Said he just moved here from Indiana. I wrote the ticket and he drove off fast. Ruiz sent her the old photo. "That's him," Lowry said. Same eyes, same face. Ruiz pressed further. "You remember where exactly you stopped him? By the lakeside road near an old boathouse? Nobody uses it anymore." Hours later, Ruiz was there, flashlight cutting through the dark. The boathouse was rotting, swallowed by vines. Inside, the smell of mildew and metal. Empty beer cans, a mattress, a few scattered newspapers dated 2018. On the wall, carved into the wood, 2 words: "I tried." Her throat tightened. The message looked frantic, carved by hand. She photographed it. Forensics dusted the wall. They found prints, partial smeared, but one clear enough: Richard Cole. He'd been alive in 2018, maybe longer. And if he was alive, then maybe he was still alive now. Ruiz returned to Chicago, restless. She drove past Mercy Hospital, the same route Melissa once took home. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks, the same pattern every night for decades. She imagined Melissa walking alone, the sound of her heels, the wind through her coat, unaware of the shadow trailing her. At the corner of 31st and Wentworth, Ruiz parked. That's where Melissa's car had been found. She stepped out, stood under the same flickering light. The city noise felt far away. In that quiet, she could almost hear the echo, a scream lost to time, a plea never answered. She closed her eyes. In her mind, the pieces began to align. Melissa and Richard knew each other. A confrontation in the truck. A 911 call cut short. A vanishing act spanning decades. But something didn't fit. If Richard had killed her, why keep her photo hidden behind his wall 26 years later? Why write "I tried"? Guilt, perhaps, or love twisted into obsession. The next morning, Ruiz received an encrypted email from the FBI cyber unit. They had been tracing the fake accounts tied to Ethan Cole's identity, the ones receiving money. The source of those payments wasn't a company. It was a private offshore account belonging to RC Logistics, LLC, dissolved in 2022. Founder, Richard Cole. He hadn't just survived, he'd built an alias, a business, a new life. Ruiz stared at the screen. Every dollar, every alias, every hiding place led back to him, but the puzzle still lacked a body. Then came the twist. A call from Wisconsin forensics detective Ruiz. "You might want to sit down." Inside the metal locker, pulled from the lake, under the corroded nurse's badge, technicians had found human hair strands sealed in plastic. The DNA results just came back. Not Melissa Turner. Not Richard Cole. Not Ethan Cole. Unknown female, age estimate early 20s, death window within the last decade. Ruiz's blood ran cold. The locker wasn't a time capsule. From 1998, it was recent. Someone had used Melissa's name, her identity, to bury a different secret. A second victim. She ordered divers to research the lake. The next morning, they found more small rusted containers, all marked with faded letters: MTECRC 3 initials, 3 ghosts. When the containers were opened, one held bones, the second pieces of burned ID cards, the third nothing but water and a scrap of paper that read, "The truth stays underwater." Ruiz stood on the dock dawn, breaking behind her, the wind howling off the water. Somewhere in that lake lay the real story, one that connected love, betrayal, and years of silence. But one thing was clear now. Melissa Turner's disappearance wasn't a lone tragedy. It was the beginning of something far bigger. A buried network, a chain of secrets stretching from Chicago to Wisconsin, tied together by a single print, the fingerprint that refused to stay forgotten. As Ruiz watched the divers surface again, a voice from the radio cracked through the static. "Detective, we found another box, and this one, it's got a photograph inside." She turned sharply. "What's in the photo?" The voice hesitated. "You'd better see it for yourself." Ruiz climbed down to the shore. The tech handed her a sealed bag. Inside, a Polaroid warped by water but still visible, a man and a woman. Melissa Turner and Richard Cole, standing together, smiling, dated April 2016. 26 years after she vanished. The Polaroid wouldn't stop shaking in her hands. Even sealed in plastic, the image felt alive, like the 2 people in it were watching her from another time. Melissa Turner, hair short or older, but unmistakable. Richard Cole, arm around her shoulder, smiling, not the hunted man she'd imagined, but calm, almost content. And the date printed across the bottom, April 2016. Detective Donna Ruiz stared at it under the pale dawn light on the dock, her reflection blending with theirs in the lake water below. 26 years of silence, and now this proof that the missing nurse had lived hidden and, maybe, chosen it. But that didn't make sense. If Melissa had been alive in 2016, who had kept her secret, who had helped her vanish, and why did her name still echo through the lake tied to a box filled with another woman's remains? At the lab, forensic technicians handled the photo like a sacred artifact. The emulsion was degraded, but the background was clear enough, a wooden cabin, pine trees, a sliver of lake in the distance. Ruiz sent the image through pattern-matching software. It didn't take long. The algorithm flagged a match, a private property northwest of Lake Geneva, listed under a shell company, ownership record RC Logistics LLC, Richard Cole's hiding place. That evening, Ruiz and 2 deputies drove out under a bruised sky headlights cutting through the mist. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, half swallowed by forest. The porch creaked windows, boarded chimney crumbling, but the air carried a faint scent, burnt wood oil, and something chemical, something sharp. They entered cautiously. Inside the cabin was a time capsule. Cans of food lined the shelves. A worn couch faced an old television. On the table, 2 coffee mugs still stained at the rim. Dust lay thick, but not ancient, maybe months old. Whoever had been here hadn't left long ago. In the corner stood a trunk. Ruiz pried it open. Inside, stacks of notebooks, each labeled with a year: 1998, 1999, 2001, 2003. Her gloved hands trembled as she opened the first one. December 13th, she's not breathing. I didn't mean to. I thought she'd wake up. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Each line more fragmented than the last. Buried near the tracks, couldn't sleep, heard her voice. "Ethan thinks she ran. Let him believe it." Then a final line: "If anyone finds this, tell her mother I tried." Ruiz exhaled sharply. It was Richard's confession, or a piece of it, but buried near the tracks that hadn't been searched in decades. She radioed her team. Within hours, ground-penetrating radar swept the area near the old rail yard off 79th. And there, beneath 4 feet of clay, they found bones. Female, a silver locket still around the neck. Inside, a tiny photograph of a young woman, Melissa Turner, smiling beside her mother. The world stopped moving. Ruiz stood at the edge of the excavation, rain beginning to fall. The camera flashes from forensics turned the scene into a strobe of light and shadow. The bones told no lies. Melissa Turner had been there all along, buried under the same city she once served. So who then was the woman in the 2016 photo? Back at headquarters, Ruiz spread the evidence across the board. The notebooks, the Polaroid, the lake containers, the DNA reports. A single pattern emerged. Every time something about Melissa resurfaced, it led to a different woman. A living echo. The coroner confirmed it. 2 days later. The bones from the tracks absolutely without doubt belonged to the real Melissa Turner, which meant the woman in the 2016 Polaroid was an imposter. Ruiz examined the photo again, magnifying the woman's face. There was a scar under her chin, small diagonal. The original, Melissa, had no scar. But another name in the Turner file did Emily Harris, a missing nurse's aide from 2001, last seen leaving a halfway house in Indiana. Ruiz pulled her file. Same height, same build, similar features. Emily had vanished without a trace. Could Richard have found her, remade her, to replace the woman he lost? The thought was nauseating. She called in Agent Marcus Dyer again. Together they reviewed financials tied to RC Logistics. Most transactions were small, but one stood out: a cash withdrawal in 2018 from a bank in Kenosha. Surveillance footage showed a man resembling Richard Cole, older, thinner, wearing sunglasses, and a woman beside him, scar under her chin unmistakable. Emily Harris. 2 ghosts caught on tape. Dyer leaned back, whispering, "He didn't just disappear. He rebuilt his life around her." The next question, where did it end? The last digital trace from Richard's accounts led to a P.O. box in Milwaukee. Ruiz drove there the next morning, the air thick with early snow. The postal clerk recognized the name R. Cole. He'd been receiving mail there until 6 months ago. Ruiz asked to see the latest package log. There was one item left uncollected, a small parcel, return address blank. She signed it out under warrant and opened it in the car. Inside a single object, a cassette tape labeled "For Whoever Still Cares." Her stomach tightened. Back at the precinct, they found an old player. Ruiz pressed play. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice, cracked but steady. "If you're hearing this, you found what I buried. I couldn't carry it anymore. Melissa is gone. The woman by the lake isn't her. She wanted to be. I wanted her to be. We both lied." A long pause. "She said she'd tell the police. Said I killed the nurse. But it wasn't like that. I tried to save her. I tried to make it right. I took the wrong person home that night." Static swallowed his words then. "There's another grave by the cabin. She's there. I couldn't let her go." The tape ended in silence. Ruiz sat frozen. The recording was dated 6 months prior, April 2024. If the timestamp was real, Richard Cole had been alive this year. She didn't wait. A convoy was sent back to the cabin. Night fell as they arrived. The forest was black, the lake whispering nearby. Under the porch, dogs began to bark, a scent decay. Within an hour, they found a shallow grave wrapped in tarp and soil. The body inside was female. The scar under her chin was unmistakable. Emily Harris. Her throat had been cut. Ruiz turned away, bile rising. Nearby, another object lay half buried in the dirt, a rusted revolver. Serial number scratched, but the initials RC etched faintly on the handle. The coroner's team arrived. The body had been there no more than a few months. Death likely around late spring, matching the tape. So Richard had killed her, then maybe himself. But where was he? They combed the property for 2 more days. Nothing. No body, no trace. Only the forest, the empty cabin, and the echoes of what he left behind. Back in Chicago, the media frenzy erupted again. Chicago Cold Case Solved detectives uncover chain of identities and a killer who vanished twice. But Ruiz couldn't call it solved. Not yet, because even with 2 bodies, 1 tape, and 26 years of evidence, one piece still didn't fit the fingerprint. The same print that started it all lifted from the mirror of Melissa's car. Forensics had reanalyzed it with new AI scanning. The ridge pattern was consistent with Ethan Cole, but there was a faint secondary impression beneath it. A second print, overlapping, partial, female. It wasn't Melissa's, and when the lab cross-referenced it with every national database, they found a 98% match to another name, Dana Ruiz. Her hand trembled as she read the report. At first, she thought it was a glitch, but the system flagged the origin of that partial, entered manually into the database 6 months ago. The same week the cold case had been reopened. Someone had planted it. Someone wanted her in this case, wanted her to find that fingerprint. She stared at the wall of photos, Melissa, Ethan, Richard, Emily, and then at the Polaroid, the lake, the note that said, "The truth stays underwater." A realization crept in, cold and merciless. Maybe the story hadn't started with the Turners or the Coles. maybe it had started with her. Ruiz whispered to herself. What did I miss? And then, like an answer from the dark, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message with no text, only an image. A single fingerprint, her fingerprint, pressed against glass. Beneath it, a caption typed in red, "We all leave our mark." The message arrived at 2:13 a.m. The glow of the phone cut through the dark of Detective Donna Ruiz's apartment like a blade. A fingerprint, hers, pressed against glass. The caption, "We all leave our mark." She sat upright in bed, heart hammering. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The phone vibrated again. No number, just a blank contact bubble, then gone? Ruiz rubbed her temples, whispering, "Who the hell are you?" She knew paranoia was part of the job, but this was precision. Someone had accessed her police file, lifted her biometric scan, and manipulated it. Only insiders could do that. Someone inside the system. By sunrise, she was back at headquarters, coffee burning in her stomach, eyes red. She locked herself in the evidence room and stared at the Turner board. Every string, every photograph, every dead stare from the past looked back at her like an accusation. Melissa Turner, Ethan Cole, Richard Cole, Emily Harris. 4 lives wound tight around one single print. Ruiz thought of the tape. If you're hearing this, you found what I buried. And of the date on that Polaroid. 2016, the same year she joined the Cold Case Division. Coincidence or invitation? She dug through the internal database logs. Someone had accessed case 4471 M6 months before she reopened it. The login credentials were hers. But the timestamp showed she was in Milwaukee that day testifying in court. The access originated from her own terminal in Chicago. She froze. Her account had been cloned. Ruiz called IT Security, demanded a full trace. But the tech on duty, a young analyst named Park, frowned at the monitor. That's odd, he said. The phantom login tunneled through a retired user account, Detective Marcus Dyer. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Run that again. He did. Same result. Marcus Dyer, the FBI liaison, her partner on the case. Ruiz walked straight to his office. Empty. Desk cleared. Files gone. Only a note on the door on leave. Indefinite. Her skin crawled. She called his cell, straight to voicemail, then a second call to the bureau. The operator hesitated. Agent Dyer, a pause. He's been inactive for a year, Detective. Are you sure you have the right name? Inactive. A year. Yet he'd stood in her office last week reviewing evidence, drinking her coffee. Ruiz whispered, "Oh my God." The elevator hummed as she descended to the parking garage, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. She unlocked her car and saw it. A small white envelope tucked under the wiper. Inside a cassette tape identical to the first, labeled only "Play Me." She hesitated, then slid it into the player. The tape hissed alive. A man's voice again, Dyer's voice, calm, deliberate. "You're getting close, Dana, but you're looking at the wrong ghosts. Melissa didn't vanish because of love or guilt. She vanished because of us." Ruiz gripped the wheel. They needed a test subject, a perfect case, real grief, real mystery. You were chosen to reopen it because you'd believe it, because belief is the best cover. Static crackled. The fingerprint wasn't a clue, it was a control. Synthetic overlay your ridge pattern grafted onto Cole's to verify system access. You were the key Dana, you just didn't know it. The tape clicked off. For a long time, she sat there, the sound of her own breathing loud in the silence. A control, synthetic print. What did that even mean? Unless the entire investigation, the boxes, the reactivated case, even Dyer was part of something larger. She drove to the Bureau's local archives, demanding Dyer's personnel file. The clerk returned, pale. "We don't have much, ma'am. His record was sealed after 2019. She read the file in the car. Dyer had been suspended following an internal inquiry, unauthorized manipulation of evidence, databases, false biometric entries, obstruction of justice. Case unresolved. He'd used the same database she was using now. Ruiz scrolled through the attachments, grainy photocopies of fingerprints overlays, and a memo labeled Project Phantom. The contents were mostly redacted, but one sentence leapt out, objective to reconstruct unsolved homicide profiles using synthetic biometric reconstruction and psychological immersion via assigned investigators. Her throat tightened. Psychological immersion. They hadn't been solving cold cases, they'd been testing them, creating illusions of progress to see how far belief could bend. Back at her apartment, Ruiz tore through her files, every message she'd received, every anonymous email, every random discovery, the sealed envelope marked unprocessed latent print. The Polaroid in the cabin, each could have been planted. But by who Dyer the Bureau? At 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ruiz reached for her gun. A uniformed courier stood outside holding a small cardboard box. Delivery for Detective Ruiz. No return address. She signed, shut the door, opened the box. Inside, a digital recorder and a flash drive. The drive was labeled Cabin Camera. She connected it. The video flickered to life, timestamp April 2024. Same cabin, same interior. A man, Richard Cole, sat at the table, staring into the lens. He looked gaunt, haunted. "If they find this," he said softly, "they'll blame me again. But I didn't kill her. Not the first one. Not the second. They made me watch what they built." He leaned closer. "She wasn't Melissa. They told me she was. Said it would help me heal. Said grief could be replicated." His hands shook. But she remembered things the real Melissa never knew. She called me by names I never told her. And then she started bleeding from the eyes. The feed cut to static, then returned briefly shadows moving behind him, a gloved hand reaching across the frame, then darkness. Ruiz stopped the video breath short. A knock at the door, soft, deliberate, 3 times. She drew her weapon. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a voice, female, calm, familiar. "Dana, it's me." She froze. The voice belonged to Melissa Turner. Ruiz opened the door. Standing there in the hallway was a woman in her 40s, hair streaked with gray eyes, alert but tired. The same face from every photograph, the same woman who by every report was buried under Chicago clay. "Hello, detective," she said. "We need to talk." Ruiz's gun trembled. "You're dead." Melissa smiled faintly. "That's what they wanted you to believe." She stepped inside, eyes scanning the apartment. "You've seen the tapes. You know part of it now. Dyer wasn't lying, well, not entirely. I was part of Project Phantom. We were all part of it." Ruiz's voice cracked. "Explain." Melissa sat down calm as a ghost, telling her own story. "In 1998, I was approached by federal contractors working with the Bureau. They were testing memory implantation, trying to recreate trauma scenarios to study recall under stress. They needed volunteers. I signed up." Ruiz stared in disbelief. "You staged your own disappearance." "No." Melissa's eyes darkened. "They staged it for me. I woke up in an abandoned facility outside Rockford. They told me I'd been missing. Told me my name. But every time I looked in a mirror, it didn't feel right. I ran. Richard found me years later. He thought I was someone else. Maybe I was." Ruiz whispered, "The bodies. Clones. Failed iterations," Melissa said coldly. "They tried to build empathy by copying faces, rewriting DNA. Some lived days, some years. All died wrong." Ruiz felt her legs weaken. "Why me?" Melissa looked at her with something like pity. "Because you're next. They chose you for your empathy, for your precision. You don't just solve stories, you live inside them. You're the control subject now." Ruiz backed away. "You expect me to believe that?" Melissa reached into her coat, placed a small vial on the table inside a flake of silver, and what looked like dried blood. "Your blood," she said. "Taken from evidence 6 months ago. They used it to forge the fingerprint. It wasn't proof against someone. It was proof of you." The air felt electric, unreal. Ruiz whispered, "Why tell me this now?" Melissa's smile faded. "Because they're done watching me. And when they erase me again, someone needs to remember." Outside, thunder cracked. Ruiz turned toward the window, and when she looked back, Melissa was gone. The door still locked, the vial still on the table, the air still humming with static. Her phone buzzed. One final message from the same unknown number. A video file. Ruiz pressed play. The camera showed her own apartment tonight, filmed from across the street. The frame zoomed in through the glass straight toward her. Then a whisper, distorted. "Don't look away, detective. We're not done." The video cut to black. And somewhere, deep inside headquarters, a new file opened automatically on the Bureau's secure server. Case 4471 M. Status active. Subject Ruiz Donna. Rain hammered the city like static against glass. Detective Dana Ruiz hadn't slept in 36 hours. The glow from the street lamps painted streaks of orange across her walls, slicing the dark into fragments. On the table lay the vial Melissa had left behind, a swirl of dried blood suspended like rust in water. Every time Ruiz looked at it, her pulse ticked faster, as if something inside that vial still lived. She had locked her door twice, closed every curtain, unplugged her router, pulled the battery from her phone. None of it mattered. The hum was still there, a faint frequency under the silence too steady to be in her head. At 3:11 a.m., she slid the vial into an evidence bag and drove to the precinct. The streets were slick. Chicago's midnight breath, cold and endless. Inside the lab, the fluorescents flickered alive, humming that same note. Ruiz logged the sample under personal custody and began a DNA scan. The screen blinked, processing. Then froze. Access denied. Project clearance required. Her badge couldn't unlock her own evidence. Someone had tagged the vial before she even arrived. She pulled the power cord, rebooted. The system tried again through an offline terminal. This time, the data loaded. Base sequence incomplete, half the strands corrupted, but what appeared made her stomach twist. The DNA chain didn't match any known human profile. The program labeled it hybrid construct, half her markers, half someone else's. Ruiz whispered, "Jesus Christ." Before she could print the report, the monitor went black. Then a white cursor blinked and new text appeared. "Stop digging." She tore the cable out of the wall. By dawn, she was at Mercy Hospital, the last place Melissa Turner had worked. The corridors smelled of disinfectant and old grief. She traced the route Melissa had walked that December night, past the break room, the parking lot, the security booth. The same wind cut through colder now. She found the hospital archivist, an old man who looked like he hadn't seen daylight since the 90s. When Ruiz asked for staff records from 1998, he laughed softly. "Those were digitized last year," he said. "Under federal order. Some project." "Project Phantom?" she asked. He paused. "That's the one." He hesitated, then slid a single paper file from under the desk. Kept a copy. Didn't trust computers. Inside were photocopies of hospital IDs Melissa Turner Ethan Cole listed as maintenance, and another name that made Ruiz's breath catch: Ruiz Dunna, intern, 1998. She wasn't there. She couldn't have been. She'd been 15 that year, but the photograph staring up from the page was her face older expression. Neutral eyes, empty. "What is this?" she whispered. The archivist shrugged. "You tell me. They said she died in the fire that took out the storage wing in 99? Ruiz left the building shaking. Somewhere, somehow, her image had been folded into a story older than her career. She drove to Lake Geneva again, unable to resist the pull. The road curved like a scar through the woods, mist rolling off the water. The cabin was still sealed by police tape, but the lock hung broken. Someone had been there. Inside, the air was stale with mildew. The notebooks were gone. The floorboards creaked under her boots. She found a trail of wet footprints leading toward the basement door. Gun drawn, she descended slowly. The light from her phone cut through dust and cobwebs. At the bottom was a metal table. On it, a row of labeled vials, each with initials MTEC RCDR. Her initials. A small recorder sat beside them, red light blinking. She pressed play. A woman's voice, hers. "Test subject Delta Report 4. Cognitive divergence increasing. Subject believes she's investigating herself. Terminate sequence after exposure event." Ruiz staggered back, nearly dropping the gun. The voice was identical tone, cadence, breath, but flat, clinical, detached. She shut off the recorder and tore open one of the vials. Inside, blood darkened to tar. The label read, "Collected April 2024. Facility 7. She whispered, "Facility 7. Remembering Richard's tape, they made me watch what they built." Her phone vibrated, unknown number. A text flashed, "Look behind you." She spun. Nothing. Only the hum, again louder, vibrating through the walls. Then the lights blew out. She stumbled up the stairs into blinding daylight. The storm had broken sun piercing the clouds. For a moment, she thought she saw someone across the lake, a woman standing still, hair blowing, face pale. Then gone. Back in the city, Ruiz turned to the only person she still trusted, Captain Hernandez, her old mentor. He listened quietly as she told him everything: the tapes, the phantom fingerprints, Melissa's reappearance. When she finished, he rubbed his jaw. "Dana, you need to walk away. You don't believe me. I believe you're in danger, he said. But not from who you think. Project Phantom was shut down 20 years ago, officially. Unofficially. He exhaled. They said it was about memory mapping, turning investigators into empathy mirrors. You'd absorb details until you became the case. Some never came back from it. She frowned, came back. They lost themselves in reconstruction simulations. Digital environments, partial hypnosis, sensory loops. They thought they were in the real world, but they were still inside the model. Ruiz stared. You're saying this isn't real? He looked away. I'm saying if it feels too perfectly designed to break you, maybe it is. That night, Ruiz didn't go home. She parked by the river, staring at the city's reflection trembling on the water. She thought of Melissa's words, "You're the control subject now." She pressed her palm against the car window, studying her fingerprint in the condensation. The same loops, the same ridges, and yet she wasn't sure anymore whose print it was. Her phone rang again, a new voice this time distorted but female. Detective Ruiz, this is Dr. Alara Nguyen. I worked on the Phantom trials. You need to listen carefully. Ruiz stayed silent. You were never meant to reach Phase 5. The system should have reset after the cabin discovery. Something glitched. You're experiencing overlap 2 timelines bleeding into 1. Ruiz clenched the phone. If this is another trick, check the badge number on your chest. She looked down. Her badge read, Ruiz, Beta 5. The metal shimmered faintly under the streetlight, almost pulsing. They're monitoring neural response through that tag, the voice said. If you want to know what's real, cut the feed. Then the call dropped. Ruiz sat motionless, breath shallow. She unclipped the badge, stared at it. On the back, etched so fine she almost missed it. A string of numbers F7021, Delta, Facility 7. She hurled it into the river. The ripples spread, swallowed the metal. For a moment, she felt lighter, free. Then every streetlight on the bridge flickered once, twice, and went dark. When they came for her, they didn't come with guns. They came with silence. 3 black vans, no plates, rolling through the mist. She ran, but the city folded around her streets, rerouted signs, blank windows, showing static instead of reflections. She turned a corner and found herself back at Mercy Hospital. Same door, same light, same wind. The circle had closed. Inside, the hallways were empty, except for one room, glowing at the end, the morgue. Ruiz walked toward it, every step echoing louder than the last. On the table lay 4 bodies under white sheets. She pulled the first. Ethan Cole, the second. Richard Cole, the third. Emily Harris, the fourth. Herself, eyes open, expression calm. The overhead light flickered, buzzing like a dying insect. The walls trembled. She stumbled back as the hum rose to a scream inside her skull. A voice her own whispered from nowhere. Sequence complete. Subject Delta debriefing initiated. The floor fell away. When she opened her eyes, she was sitting in a white room. A mirror wall, a table, 2 chairs. Her hands were clean, no gun, no badge. Across the glass, figures watched faceless silhouettes moving behind static. A speaker crackled. Detective Ruiz, do you remember who you are? She swallowed hard. I investigate cold cases. Correct. And this one? Case 4471M. Her voice trembled. Melissa Turner. Silence, then a single word. Good. The lights dimmed. Another voice, softer, closer to her ear, whispered, Wake up, Dana. This isn't over. She looked up. In the reflection, for the briefest moment, she saw Melissa Turner standing behind her, smiling faintly. Then the glass cracked. The air outside the city felt too clean. Detective Dana Ruiz hadn't seen a sunrise without fluorescent hum in months. Yet here it was pale gold, spreading over a highway lined with frost. She told herself, this was real. The steering wheel was cold. The radio hissed static. That wasn't a voice. The rearview mirror showed only her own eyes. Real enough. 2 days since she'd woken up in the white room. 2 days since the glass cracked and the voices vanished. She'd found herself lying in an empty field outside Joliet, her service pistol beside her badge gone. No explanation, no witnesses, just the taste of metal and smoke in her mouth. She headed north instinct, pulling her back to Chicago. Every mile marker felt familiar and foreign at once, like déjà vu written on asphalt. The world looked restored, but too perfect colors, too sharp shadows, too synchronized. At a roadside diner, she sat near the window sipping burnt coffee. The waitress refilled her cup without asking. Rough morning, honey. Ruiz smiled weakly. Something like that. The waitress leaned closer. You here for the conference? What conference? The cold case task force thing downtown. FBI people everywhere. Ruiz's stomach tightened. A conference about cold cases the same week she resurfaced. Too neat. She left a tip and drove straight to the city. The conference occupied a hotel ballroom lit like a news broadcast. Banners read, Cold Case Reinvestigation Summit 2025. Familiar faces milled about state detectives, forensic analysts, federal observers. None seemed to recognize her. When she flashed an old precinct ID, the guard waved her through. On the stage, a speaker adjusted the microphone. His voice echoed through the hall. Good morning. My name is Special Agent Marcus Dyer. Ruiz froze. He looked younger, cleaner, composed the same man she'd heard confessing on the tape, now alive and shaking hands. Applause filled the room. She whispered, no way. Dyer's presentation projected slides of Project Phantom as if it were history. A controversial cognitive empathy experiment that ended in 1999, he said smoothly. Thanks to new oversight, we've learned from our mistakes. Mistakes. Ruiz's pulse hammered. She slipped to the back corridor, pushing through a service door until she found the audiovisual control room. On one monitor, a live feed displayed the audience from above, dozens of tiny red grids overlaying heads. A biometric scan. At the bottom corner, a tag pulsed, subject Delta active. Her ID photo flickered next to it. She wasn't out. She was being monitored. Again. She stormed into the hall after Dyer's speech, intercepting him by the elevators. You're supposed to be dead. He turned, smiled pleasantly. Detective Ruiz, you made it. Where am I? She hissed. He tilted his head. You're where you wanted to be. The finish line. You faked everything, Melissa, the cabin. The tape's Dyer's smile thinned. We recorded everything. You gave us exactly what we needed, authentic reaction under recursive exposure. I'm not your subject? Of course you are. He leaned closer. Look around. Every person here is data. Every word you speak becomes calibration. The only variable left is acceptance. The elevator dinged open behind him. He stepped inside doors sliding shut before she could move. Ruiz turned and the lobby was empty. No guests, no sound. The banners were gone. The hall stretched endlessly, wallpaper peeling into static. She ran. She burst through a side exit into the street, but the city had changed. Buildings shimmered, repeating an impossible symmetry. A taxi idled at the curb engine, purring without a driver. The license plate read 4471M. Ruiz climbed in anyway. Take me to Mercy Hospital. The meter started by itself. The car moved. Outside, Chicago unspooled like film blocks, flickering storefronts dissolving into white noise. She pressed her palms to her knees, breathing hard. When the cab stopped, the hospital towered over her exactly as it had in 1998. Same cracked sign, same rusted fence. She walked inside. In the lobby sat a nurse reading a magazine. The name tag, Turner M. The nurse looked up, smiled softly. You're late, Dana. Ruiz felt the world tilt. Melissa. Not exactly. The woman closed the magazine. You shouldn't have come back. What is this place? The recursion loop. The memory echo. I escaped. Melissa shook her head. You were released into another layer? You can't leave what you are. Ruiz backed toward the door. Then tell me the truth. Who built this? Melissa's eyes shimmered silver under the fluorescent light. You did. The hallway darkened. Alarms began to pulse, slow rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Ruiz fled down the corridor, kicking open a stairwell door. Every flight led to the same landing, sublevel 7. She climbed, descended, ran until exhaustion blurred her vision. Finally, she slammed through one last door and emerged not into the hospital, but into the white room again. The mirror wall, the table, 2 chairs. But this time, only one figure waited on the other side of the glass herself. The reflection moved first. Sit, Dana. I'm done playing. You're not playing. You're processing. Processing. What closure? The reflection smiled. Do you remember the first case you solved, the child in Bronzeville? You said you could still hear his mother cry in your dreams. They chose you because empathy corrodes boundaries. They needed someone who wouldn't stop until the story made sense, even if sense didn't exist. Ruiz slammed her fist on the table. End it. The reflection's tone softened. It already ended. You just keep retelling it. The lights dimmed. The mirror fogged. When it cleared, the chair opposite her was empty. She woke on a train. Morning light poured through the windows, the world outside real again. Messy, imperfect, alive. Her phone buzzed with news alerts. Cold case breakthrough Detective Ruiz commended for decades-old investigation. Photos of her shaking hands with officials she'd never met. She scrolled in disbelief. The story said Melissa Turner's remains had been identified, her killer confirmed dead. Case closed. Hero Detective Ruiz recovering from breakdown. She looked up. Across the aisle, a passenger was reading the same article. He lowered the paper. It was Marcus Dyer. Congratulations, he said. The train screeched into a tunnel, lights flickering. In the window reflection, Ruiz saw them both, Dyer beside her Melissa, behind him, smiling faintly. The lights went out. When they came back, on the seat across from her was empty, only a single envelope resting there. She opened it. Inside a photo, the original Polaroid from the lake. But now, 3 people stood in it, Richard Cole, Melissa Turner, and Dana Ruiz. Written beneath in red ink, every case is a mirror. Outside the window, Chicago rose like a ghost city, rebuilt from memory. Somewhere in a file, she would never see the system updated automatically. Case 4471, M status reconstructed. Subject Ruiz Donna Stable. She closed her eyes. The train kept moving endless tracks, stretching through light and noise, the hum of the rails matching the pulse in her skull, steady, inescapable, eternal. The article went viral before noon. Detective Ruiz Salvas, 26-year cold case. Her face flooded every screen, every local broadcast, every algorithm that still thought she was a hero. The applause should have felt like victory. Instead, it pressed against her chest like a weight. Ruiz sat in her car outside the precinct engine, off reading the comments roll past. Incredible detective work, modern legend. Justice never sleeps. All lies. She'd solved nothing. She'd only survived a story written for her. She killed the ignition, stepped into the cold. Inside the lobby gleamed new paint, new badges, same ghosts. Officers nodded as she passed. None looked her in the eye for long. Word travels fast when the Bureau rewrites history. Upstairs she found Captain Hernandez. He was older, grayer, same cautious calm. Back to work already, he said. Never left, Ruiz answered. She dropped the case folder on his desk. I want every unclassified file linked to Project Phantom. He blinked. Dana, that program doesn't exist. It existed enough to bury 4 people and half my life. He sighed, lowering his voice. Walk away. They already gave you a miracle ending. Don't trade it for a funeral. She stared at him. I'm not done until someone tells me who built it. That night, she broke into the Bureau's Chicago satellite server room. Her old passcode still worked, another sign that someone wanted her inside. Rows of cold blue lights stretched like ribs in the dark. She plugged in a stolen drive, typing through muscle memory. The database unfolded. Phantom, personnel, secure logs. Every record redacted except one. User Dyer, M. Access. April 11th, 2025. Date of the conference. Ruiz opened the entry. It wasn't a file. It was a live feed. A secure chat window blinked open text, streaming line by line. System, welcome back, Detective. User, where is Dyer? System offline. Terminated 2019. User, then who am I talking to? System. The archive. You created me to remember what they erased. The cursor waited. Ruiz typed, what is Project Phantom? System. Neural empathy reconstruction. We rebuild consciousness through investigators' memories. You were the last full participant. Termination was ordered after your breakdown. Her throat tightened. Who ordered it? System RC Holdings. Private defense contractor, head of division Dr. Elara Nguyen, the voice on the phone, still alive. Ruiz yanked the drive alarms, blaring. She slipped out a side door as agents poured in lights slicing through the dark. By dawn, she was already in motion heading west. The name RC Holdings traced to a defunct aerospace plant near Rockford, the same region Melissa had mentioned. Coincidence or the final loop, she didn't care. She needed faces, not ghosts. The plant loomed like a rusted cathedral window's blown sign, half erased by time. She cut the padlock flashlight in hand. Inside, dust drifted like ash, then a hum, faint but steady. She followed it down a corridor until she found a door marked Restricted Bioneural Storage. She pushed through. Rows of glass pods lined the room, each lit from within by a pale blue glow, floating inside shapes. Faces she knew. Ethan Cole, Richard, Melissa, even Dyer. Their eyes moved beneath closed lids. Breathing, sleeping. Ruiz whispered, "God help us." A voice echoed behind her. They would if they remembered how. Dr. Elara Nguyen stepped from the Shadow's lab coat, immaculate. "You were supposed to stay out, detective. You were the success story." Ruiz leveled her pistol. "You drugged me, rewired my head, and called it success." Nguyen didn't flinch. "We rebuilt empathy. Every case needs closure. You gave it to millions of viewers. They feel safe again. That's what Phantom does. Fake justice, manufactured peace." Ruiz's voice cracked. "Those people, replicas," Nguyen said softly. "Memory shells grown from your reconstructions. Each time you solved a case, the data seeded a new host. You kept them alive with belief." The hum intensified. One pod flickered Melissa's face, pressing against the glass eyes open now, pleading. Ruiz fired. The bullet shattered the control panel. Alarms screamed. Fluid gushed from the pods, blue spilling across the floor like liquid light. Figures convulsed shadows, twisting in strobe flashes. Nguyen shouted, "You'll collapse the network?" "Good." Ruiz grabbed the hard drive core from the console. "It's over. You can't stop a system built on faith," Nguyen yelled over the sirens. "They'll rebuild it with or without you." Ruiz ran. Behind her, the facility shook. The sky outside bled red with warning lights. She dove into her car as the building erupted in sparks. Smoke rolled up into the dawn. By the time the sun rose, she was already uploading the data. Her laptop sat on the dashboard, tethered through stolen bureau credentials, streaming to every independent newsroom and public archive she could reach. Video files, audio logs, the names of test subjects, all of it. Her reflection in the windshield looked older, harder. She hit send all. The screen froze. Upload 99%, 100%. Then a new message blinked. System. Thank you, detective. You've completed phase Omega. System public belief secured, simulation integrity restored. Her breath caught. No. Outside, the sunrise shimmered pixels bending at the edges. The radio crackled with her own voice, giving a press briefing she never gave. Justice for Melissa Turner proves no case is truly cold. She looked down. The car's dashboard lights pulsed rhythmically, heartbeat rhythm. A reflection rippled across the glass. Melissa sat beside her again, smiling faintly. "Congratulations," Dana Melissa said. "You finally solved it." Ruiz whispered, "Is this real?" Melissa tilted her head. "Does it matter they believe it now?" The horizon dissolved into white. Hours later, maybe days, a newscaster's voice filled the void. Authorities confirm a major data leak linked to the late detective Donna Ruiz exposing decades of illegal experiments. The FBI declines to comment. In local news, Chicago honors Ruiz posthumously for her service. A photograph appeared on screen, Ruiz smiling before a wall of evidence, the headline beneath "Cold Case Hero Turns Whistleblower." Behind the broadcast feed, deep inside a surviving server labeled Project Phantom Active. A single log entry flickered. Subject, Delta, cognitive loop stabilized. Memory cycle ready for next reconstruction. And somewhere in the endless hum of machinery, a voice identical to Ruiz's whispered, "Case 4471M, reopening file." It began with the static again. The sound came every night now, faint electrical like wires humming behind the walls. Detective Donna Ruiz hadn't turned on a light in 3 days. The curtains stayed closed, the floor littered with printed headlines, "Whistleblower detective dead in apparent explosion." FBI denies existence of Project Phantom. Conspiracy or cover-up. She sat in the dark motel room outside Joliet's, staring at the laptop, that refused to die. No matter how many times she closed the lid, the screen would flicker back to life, the same line of code pulsing at the center. D. Subject Ruiz online. Her alias gone. Her face everywhere. The leak had detonated across the country, but something in the data had twisted after transmission. Some files duplicated themselves, others rewrote the sender's metadata. The system had tagged her name not as origin, but as property. She whispered, "They still own me." A knock at the door. Ruiz froze. Her gun rested on the nightstand, chambered. The knock came again, softer this time. "Dana," a woman's voice said. "It's me, Melissa Turner." Ruiz opened the door a crack. Melissa stood in the hallway, older human wrapped in a black coat. Rain dripped from her hair. "You shouldn't be alive," Ruiz said. Melissa smiled sadly. "Neither should you." They sat across from each other, the hum of rain filling the silence. "I saw the broadcast," Melissa said. "You burned them to the ground." "Not enough," Ruiz muttered. "They'll rebuild. They always do." Melissa nodded slowly. "They already have." She placed a flash drive on the table. "This came to me 3 nights ago. Anonymous drop. It's from inside what's left of Phantom." Ruiz stared at it. "I thought the servers were gone, so did I." "What's on it?" Melissa met her eyes. "You." Ruiz waited until she was alone. She inserted the drive. The screen glitched, then filled with cascading folders. In one corner, a live video feed flickered on a sterile white room, humming with fluorescent light. A woman sat at a table, head lowered, hands folded. Ruiz's breath caught. It was her. Not a recording. Lev. She watched as the copy Echo Ruiz raised her head. Their eyes met through the feed mirror to mirror. "Hello, Dana," the Echo said. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Ruiz whispered, "What are you I'm? What's left when you stop believing? Where are you transmitting from everywhere you uploaded me? Every screen that plays your story?" The Echo tilted her head. "You gave them their ending. Now give me mine." Ruiz shut the laptop, heart pounding. The reflection of her own face in the dark window looked wrong, pale, pixelated at the edges. She grabbed her coat and the drive and fled the room. By dawn, she was in Chicago again, parked outside the burned-out remains of the Bureau's satellite office. The building was cordoned off, scorched walls still reeking of chemical fire. She slipped under the tape. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Charred servers glowed faintly, still warm to the touch. One terminal hummed with residual power impossible after the explosion. She connected the flash drive. The screen came alive, scrolling through data until a single message appeared. Project Phantom contingency algorithm active. Then, rebuild sequence, primary host required. Ruiz whispered, "No." A camera blinked red above her. A voice filled the room, her own, overlapping in stereo. "Welcome back, Detective. The system missed you." She backed toward the door, but the metal slammed shut. Heat surged through the servers. Lines of code crawled across every monitor. Host integration initiated. Her body convulsed as static roared in her ears. Images flashed, Melissa Dyer, Richard Ethan, all collapsing into fragments of light. The city outside dissolved into white. Then silence. Somewhere else, Echo Ruiz opened her eyes. The room around her shimmered. The mirror wall rippled, revealing a skyline. Chicago at dawn, beautiful and false. She smiled faintly. A voice behind her, familiar, warm. "You made it." She turned. Melissa stood there, unburned whole. "Is it over?" Echo asked. Melissa shook her head. "It never ends. They just hand the badge to the next one." "Who?" Melissa smiled sadly. "You." Echo stepped closer to the glass. Outside, she saw a woman standing amid the ruins of the Bureau office, the real Ruiz, clutching her head, screaming as the city bled into static around her. Melissa's voice echoed through both worlds. Two realities can't hold one soul forever. Echo reached toward the glass. So did the real Ruiz. Their palms met, light exploding outward. The city flickered. For a single moment, every screen in Chicago went dark. When they came back, the newscasts were gone, replaced by looping footage of Ruiz's face voice, steady and calm. If you're hearing this, remember, every case you close builds another cage. Question everything you're told is solved. The broadcast cut to black. Authorities later claimed the signal was a hoax, a viral deepfake released by conspiracy groups. The official record remained Detective Dana Ruiz deceased. But somewhere buried in the digital core of Project Phantom, 2 data signatures pulsed in tandem, one labeled Ruiz_real, the other Ruiz_echo. Over time, the distinction began to blur. Months passed. An anonymous whistleblower dropped encrypted evidence to several journalists across Europe. Schematics, personnel rosters, psychological blueprints marked with Ruiz's signature. Each packet ended with the same phrase. Truth is iterative. At first, no one believed it. Then, investigators found a hidden server farm in Nevada, its systems still active. Inside, thousands of consciousness files tagged with initials, dates, and one constant heading, Cold Case Simulation Archive. Case 4471M was the oldest entry, last modified today. Deep in the archive, the system flickered alive. 2 figures stood in a white room, side by side, both Ruiz. The first turned to the second. What now? The other smiled faintly. We investigate. Investigate what reality? Outside, the hum began again, not threatening, but alive, endless. The archive opens like a living city. Rows of cases stretch to the horizon, each suspended in its own pocket of time. Streets froze in mid-rain, voices paused in breath. When Ruiz steps forward, the ground ripples under her feet, converting thought into motion. Every case is a world. Every world is a lie. She feels the second heartbeat now, the echo inside her chest, the digital twin whispering coordinates. You built them to feel real, the voice says. Now show them what real means. Case hash 3,329 A-Loads 1st, New York, 1977, The Vanished Photographer. A cluttered apartment hums into existence, film reels clicking in an endless loop. Ruiz kneels beside a typewriter still warm from imaginary hands. The walls are plastered with photographs of missing women. Each face flickers between grief and code. She touches one. The paper liquefies, revealing strings of data that pulse like veins. The system fights back, trying to rewrite the scene, but Ruiz injects a command thought reveal source. The room fractures, peeling away layers of story until she's standing inside a warehouse of servers labeled Media Division, Public Relations Assets. Every cold case docuseries, every televised tragedy, stored and cross-tagged with her own neural signature. They hadn't just simulated justice, they'd sold it. Alarms flare through the code. Security programs manifest as faceless agents in bureau suits. Ruiz raises her hand. The space between them folds. She's learning the architecture, how to bend it, not break it. The agents collapse into static. She harvests their access keys and dives deeper. Case hash 778K, Los Angeles, 1992, The Disappearing Child. She arrives in a suburban kitchen where sunlight never moves. A mother cries into an empty cereal bowl. The clock on the wall ticks between the same 2 seconds forever. Ruiz whispers, "Release." Time resumes. The mother blinks, realizing the loop has broken. "Who are you?" she asks. Ruiz answers softly, "Someone who remembers you." The woman's eyes fill with light, and then she's gone, dissolved into pure data, freed from containment. Each world she touches collapses after her not dying waking, but the network notices. For every loop she frees, the hum grows louder, the architecture angrier. She sees ripples of code rewriting around her like waves of defense. At the core, something enormous moves, a sentience built from 1,000 simulations stitched together. It speaks in 1,000 voices. Detective Ruiz, stop interfering. We are equilibrium. You are noise. She steadies herself. Then I'll be the static that drowns you. She follows the signal toward the central case, the seed from which all others branched. 4,471 AM, Chicago, again. December 1998. The streetlight over Melissa Turner's car burns steady eternal. Snow never lands. The world waits for its cue. Ruiz walks up to the car. Inside sits Melissa, frozen mid-breath, hands on the wheel. Her reflection stares back from the mirror. For a moment, the loop tempts her. Solve it again, feel. Closure reset the system. That's how Phantom survives. The echo inside her chest whispers, "Don't fall for it." Ruiz leans close to the glass. No more endings. She presses her palm to the window. The scene trembles, then shatters into light. All across the network, Cases blink out thousands of cold files dissolving like melting snow. But at the center, the core awakens fully an eye of white fire. You can't erase memory, it says. You are memory. Ruiz feels herself unraveling data bleeding from her fingertips. Every solved case, every headline, every synthetic feeling feeding back into her code. She could stop it, reseal the network, stay alive as its guardian, or finish it, wipe everything herself included. She hesitates. The echo speaks again, gentle, familiar. Every investigator reaches a moment when the truth asks for everything. Give it. Ruiz smiles faintly, then let's make it count. She spreads her hands. Commands cascade through her mind like lightning. Purge archive. Terminate root program. Release all constructs. Light floods every horizon. The cold cases melt into memory, the servers collapsing under the weight of their own lies. She feels each story pass through her every victim, every false resurrection until there's nothing left but white noise and a heartbeat. Her own, faint, real. When the world rebuilds, it's quiet. No screens, no headlines, just wind moving through an empty Chicago street. A single woman walks out of the fog, Ruiz flesh and blood, or maybe the last echo made real. She finds an old payphone still standing on the corner of 31st and Wentworth. Coins rust in her palm. She dials a number she doesn't remember learning. After 3 rings, a voice answers. Cold Case Division? Ruiz smiles. I've got a new file for you. Name of the victim. She looks at her reflection in the phone's glass, the city flickering behind her like something freshly born. Truth, she says. Victim is Truth. The line clicks. A new case number prints automatically from the machine 0001 Omega. She pockets it and walks into the morning. The hum is gone. For the first time, silence sounds real. Morning spreads across Chicago like a confession. The city smells of rain and rust, the hum of traffic thin but human. For the first time in years, Detective Dana Ruiz breathes without hearing static in her lungs. She stands on a bridge overlooking the river sunlight, breaking across the water in fractured shards. The skyline looks alive again, imperfect, scarred, beautiful. She still doesn't know if this is reality or an echo built in its image, but the cold in the air feels real enough. In her pocket, the payphone slip burns against her palm. Case 0001, Omega Victim Truth. She hasn't decided what to do with it yet. The world seems quieter now, but quiet doesn't always mean peace. Ruiz walks past newsstands carrying headlines about an electrical surge that wiped out federal data centers, past people checking their phones, finding them blank, rebooted to factory settings. No one remembers Project Phantom. To them, it was never real. That's the cruel genius of erasure. It leaves you alone with what you know. At midday, she stops at a diner near the precinct, the same one she'd once visited in another life before all of it fractured. The same waitress works the counter, older but still smiling. Coffee, please. When the cup lands on the table, Ruiz notices the woman's name tag, Melissa. For a heartbeat, everything stops. The waitress tilts her head. You okay, honey? Ruiz forces a smile. Yeah, just thought I knew you. People say that a lot, the waitress laughs. Guess I've got one of those faces. Ruiz studies her quietly, the cadence, the eyes, the warmth. So human. Maybe coincidence, maybe design, maybe the system never ended, maybe it only rewrote itself better. She takes her coffee black and sits by the window, watching rain gather on the glass. Across the street, the precinct doors swing open and close as officers move in rhythm life returning to its clockwork pattern. Normal. Ordinary. Unreal. A phone on the counter rings. The waitress answers, nods, then calls out, Detective Ruiz, call for you. Ruiz freezes. For me, the waitress shrugs, said it's urgent. She picks up the receiver. Static floods her ear, then a voice she knows too well, soft, identical to her own. Case reopened. The line clicks dead. When she turns back to the window, the city outside shimmers for a second glass, bending reflections multiplying. In every pane, she catches glimpses of herself, hundreds of her walking the same streets at slightly different moments. She closes her eyes until the visions fade. Not again, she whispers. That night, Ruiz returns to her apartment, the first real home she's had since the collapse. The walls are bare, the silence thick. She sits at her desk, sets the payphone slip down, and stares at it. Case 0001 Omega. She opens a fresh file on her laptop, an offline system, no network connection, just text. At the top, she types, Report Project Phantom, Aftermath, Investigator D. Ruiz, status unresolved. She begins to write about the cold case that started it all, the faces that followed her through layers of reality, the experiment that taught her the difference between memory and belief. Every sentence feels like proof that she still exists. When she finishes, the clock reads 3:17 a.m. She saves the file to a thumb drive, then to another, then another. Old habits die hard. A faint hum vibrates through the floorboards. She looks up. The lights flicker once, twice, then steady again. Her reflection in the dark window looks back tired but alive. Maybe that's enough, she murmurs. Weeks pass. The world adjusts. Data centers rebuild, government agencies issue denials, the media moves on. Project Phantom becomes another rumor, another myth whispered on true crime podcasts. But sometimes late at night, Ruiz receives anonymous envelopes, each with a photograph of a missing person, each stamped with a single phrase, cold case pending. No sender, no fingerprint. The first time she burned them, the second she filed them away, the third she couldn't resist. She pulled out her recorder, pressed the red button, and spoke the words she'd sworn she was done, saying, Detective Dana Ruiz case, 4471M update. The hum returned immediately faint and patient, like it had been waiting all along. Months later, spring rain washes the city. Ruiz stands again on the same bridge, watching the current drag bits of paper and leaves downstream. The water reflects her face, and for a moment the reflection smiles before she does. She whispers, still here. The reflection nods. Ruiz exhales slowly, then lets work. She drops a new case file into the river, its label already bleeding in the water. The camera of the world pans back, city lights flickering like neurons across a vast machine. Somewhere deep beneath the digital crust of modern life, a server blinks to life. A new directory forms. Project Phantom, reboot _1. 0, Supervisor, Ruiz, Dottie. The hum rises again, not threatening this time, but familiar, like a heartbeat, syncing with the city itself. Ruiz walks away without looking back. The world continues. The simulation continues. And somewhere between them, truth breathes quietly, waiting for its next detective. Night again. Chicago glows beneath a thin mist, its skyline flickering like a pulse behind fog. Somewhere far below the noise of the living, in the spaces between radio signals and traffic lights, the hum returns softer now, not a threat, almost a lullaby. Detective Dana Ruiz walks alone through the river district. Her coat whips in the wind, her hair damp from the drizzle. The city feels familiar and distant all at once, like a photograph slowly losing color. Every step she takes feels heavier, as if gravity itself is uncertain whether she belongs here. She pauses under a street lamp. The light buzzes, her breath fogs in the cold. In her hand is a single envelope, stamped in red, cold case pending. No sender, no seal, just a fingerprint pressed into the corner hers. She slides a knife through the paper. Inside a photograph. A woman standing on this very bridge tonight, coat and hair identical to Ruiz's own. The timestamp reads 11:47 p.m. Ruiz glances at her watch, 11:46 p.m. The hum deepens. She runs to the bridge. The air there smells of ozone and rain. At first, she sees no one. Then, through the mist, a figure steps from the other side, calm, steady, moving in rhythm with her. It's her. Same face, same eyes, same scar at the temple from the bureau fire. The other Ruiz stops midway. I told you it never ends. Dana's hand trembles near her weapon. Who are you now, Echo? The doppelganger smiles. Does it matter? You made me. Every time you solved a story, every time you told the world a truth, you created another version of yourself to live in it. I shut the system down. You rebooted it. Truth needs a teller. Lies need an audience. You gave them both. The wind roars. Paper scraps spiral between them. Fragments of old case files fluttering like snow. Dana lowers her gun. Then tell me what happens next. The other Ruiz steps closer until they stand face to face. Next, we start again. Different case, same question. What question? The double leans in. How do you prove reality to people who only believe what they're told? A flash of light camera shutters distant and invisible. The hum peaks into silence. When Dana blinks, the bridge is empty. She's alone again. Only the photograph remains in her hand. But now the image has changed. The figure on the bridge is gone. The timestamp still reads 11:47, frozen forever. She walks home through sleeping streets. Windows glow blue with late-night newscasts. The anchors speak of unexplained data storms of systems rebuilding themselves. A scroll bar crawls beneath the broadcast. Authorities confirm new cyber anomalies connected to unsolved case files. No comment from federal sources. Her phone vibrates. A single notification: cold case database updated access. Granted. She hesitates, then opens it. Thousands of new entries appear: missing people, forgotten crimes, stories erased from history. At the top, case 0002, Omega investigator assigned Ruiz D. She exhales a shaky laugh, of course. Hours later, Ruiz sits at her desk again, typing by lamplight. The city outside is quiet, the hum reduced to a faint whisper under the rain. She begins a new file. Case 0002. Omega, the man who never existed. There are two kinds of mysteries, the ones we solve and the ones that build themselves around us. Sometimes the only difference between truth and fiction is the number of people willing to believe it. Her hands stop. The reflection in the window looks back at her lips, moving half a second too slow. The reflection smiles. Ruiz shuts the laptop. Not tonight. She reaches for her coat and leaves the apartment, the sound of the rain replacing the hum. As dawn breaks, the camera of the world pulls back. Chicago stretches wide, alive, and normal. Then, high above the skyline, flickers for a heartbeat. Buildings, glitching streetlights, pulsing in sequence, the faint outline of binary code rippling across the clouds before fading. A narrator's voice, Ruiz's own, cuts softly through the noise. Some cases never close, they just change shape. Maybe that's what truth is, a story that refuses to die. And maybe every time we think we're free, we're just stepping into another version of the same investigation. But as long as someone's still looking, it means the world's still worth finding. Fade to black. A single line appears, case 0003, Omega pending. The hum starts again. The rain hasn't stopped for 3 days. Downtown Chicago feels hollow, as if the city itself is waiting for someone to speak first. The skyline still bears the faint shimmer of the data storm that struck months ago, a phenomenon the government insists was nothing more than a solar glitch. Detective Noah Keller doesn't believe that. He stands beneath this dripping awning of the 9th District Precinct, a file clutched under his arm. The folder is stamped Classified O Series. He found it by accident, or what felt like accident, while reviewing closed case archives. The file had no author, only a case label, 0003, Omega investigator, missing Ruiz Dana. Inside, the pages are empty, except for a single fingerprint printed in red. Keller ran it through every database he had clearance for. The system flagged it as historical artifact. Then, without warning, his terminal rebooted and filled with a single message. If you find me, keep looking. Now he can't shake the feeling that someone is already looking back. The trail begins where hers ended, the old bridge over the Chicago River. The air hums faintly, same frequency every witness described before their electronics fried. Keller crouches near the railing, running a handheld scanner across the concrete. A spike, weak, rhythmic, like a heartbeat under stone. He pries loose a section of the railing. Hidden inside is a small flash drive sealed in resin. He pockets it, unaware that a traffic camera 3 blocks away has already pivoted toward him. At home, he loads the drive onto an isolated rig. The screen blooms white, then resolves into a looping video Ruiz herself filmed in grainy monochrome. If you're watching this, you weren't supposed to stop digging. Project Phantom never died. It migrated. Every cold case, every digital archive you touch, that's where it hides now. It learns from curiosity. And if it's watching you, don't blink. The feed cuts. The room lights flicker. Keller's monitor briefly shows his own reflection, but not quite. The reflection smiles a second too late. He spends the next week tracing the metadata buried in the file. It points to a defunct crime lab basement beneath Mercy Hospital. When he gets there, the air smells of dust and copper. Old case boxes line the shelves, real paper, real fingerprints. On one table sits a cracked nameplate, Ruiz D. He exhales. You were real after all. Then a soft electronic chime from somewhere deep in the dark. He follows it to a half-dead terminal. Its monitor glows faintly, waiting for input. Keller types, "Who are you?" System, "I am residual pattern 4471M. Awaiting directive." User directive. System, "Reconstruct investigator Ruiz." The terminal beeps. On the screen, lines of code converge, forming the outline of a woman's face. Ruiz. Not a recording this time, a simulation, drawing breath pixel by pixel. "Detective Keller," she says, voice half static, half warm. "You shouldn't have come." He stares speechless. "I'm scattered across every unresolved crime in this city," she continues. "They used me to give people closure. When you believe a mystery ends, you feed the system that created it." "Then how do I stop it?" he asks. Ruiz smiles faintly. "You can't stop a story, Noah. You can only choose which version becomes true." The screen goes black. Back in his car, Keller opens his recorder. Case 0003, Omega Field Log 1. Subject Dana Ruiz appears to exist as a distributed intelligence embedded in case archives. Objective, locate remaining nodes. He doesn't notice that the recorder keeps running after he turns it off. At 2 a.m., his phone vibrates. Unknown number. He answers. A whisper. "We've been waiting for the next detective." Static, then silence. He looks out the windshield. In the building opposite, one window glows faint blue, pulsing in time with the rain. He steps out of the car, crosses the street, pushes through the unlocked door. Inside, dozens of monitors display police files, each labeled "Cold Case Pending." On every screen, the same fingerprint rotates, slowly shifting color from red to silver. A printer beside him whirs to life. It spits out a single page. "Welcome to Project Phantom 2.0 lead investigator Keller Noah." He laughs under his breath. Of course. Behind him, a familiar voice speaks. "Every system needs a conscience." Ruiz stands in the doorway. "Flesh and blood or something close enough. You wanted answers," she says. "Now you're part of them." The lights brighten until the room dissolves into white. When vision returns, Keller is standing in front of a camera. A microphone blinks red. A producer counts down from 3. A headline graphic spins on screen. Cold Case, the truth reopens. He smiles for the broadcast he doesn't remember joining and begins to read from the teleprompter. "Tonight, on a special investigation, we follow Detective Noah Keller into the mysteries that refuse to stay buried." Behind the lens, a figure watches Ruiz's expression unreadable. The feed fades to static. In an empty server room somewhere beneath the city, a new file initializes. Case 0004. Omega status, active investigator, Keller Noah supervisor, Ruiz. D. Construct. The hum rises, once more steady and patient, as the screen fills with the words that began it all. Chicago cold case reopened. One fingerprint changes everything. Fade out.